High in the mountains, in a place where the air is so thin it can kill you, archaeologists found something that shouldn't be there. Stone tools, ancient campfires, the scattered traces of people thousands of years old, left in a place modern climbers can barely survive with oxygen tanks and high-tech gear. Not one site, many. Scattered across the highest places on Earth, the Andes, the Ethiopian mountains, and the Tibetan Plateau, right in the shadow of the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. Which raises a staggering question. If ancient humans were living this high this long ago, did any of them ever try to go all the way to the top? Did ancient humans reach Everest? The real answer is stranger than a simple yes or no. It's part impossible, part unbelievable, and it ends with a secret hidden inside your own DNA, passed down from a species that no longer exists. So let's climb carefully toward the answer, starting with why the summit itself is almost certainly a place no ancient human ever stood. Let's be honest right away, because the honest answer is what makes this interesting. Did an ancient human ever stand on the actual summit of Everest? Almost certainly not. The very top of Everest is one of the most lethal places on the planet. We'll see exactly why in a moment. So if you came here for a tale of cavemen planting a spear on the peak of Everest, that probably never happened. But here's the twist. The truth we did find is so much more impressive than that myth. Because while no one was standing on the summit, ancient humans were doing something almost as unbelievable. They were living full-time in places that should have killed them. Places where your body starts to fail just by being there. And how they pulled that off is a story of the human body doing something extraordinary with help from a ghost. So first, let's understand the enemy, what high altitude actually does to a human being. To understand why the summit is off limits, you have to understand what happens to your body as you go up. The problem isn't just cold, though it's brutally cold. The real killer is invisible. The air itself thins out. At the top of Everest, there's only about a third as much oxygen in each breath as there is at sea level. Your body is a machine that runs on oxygen. Starve it and everything starts to break down, fast. Climbers call the altitude above roughly 8,000 meters the death zone. The name is not an exaggeration. Up there, your body is actively dying. It cannot get enough oxygen to sustain itself, no matter how hard you breathe. Your thinking slows. Your judgment fails. Fluid can build up in your lungs and around your brain. Every minute up there, you are on a clock, quietly running out. And this is with modern gear. Insulated suits, bottled oxygen, decades of mountaineering knowledge. Even with all of that, people die on Everest every single year. Many never come back down. Now strip all of it away. No oxygen tank, no insulated suit, no ropes, no maps, no rescue. Just a prehistoric human in furs, breathing thin air with a stone spear. For that person, the summit of Everest isn't difficult. It's simply impossible. A wall the body cannot pass. So no, almost certainly no ancient human ever stood on that peak. That part of the legend is just a legend. But, and this is where it gets amazing, the summit was never the real story. Because the mountains around it, nearly as high, weren't a wall to ancient humans. They were home. Your lungs can work at full power and still lose the fight because there's simply less oxygen in the air to grab. Above 8,000 meters, no human can stay indefinitely. Even acclimatized climbers can only survive there for hours, not days. The cold makes it worse. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, and fierce winds tear away your body heat. The summit of Everest is, for the unprotected human body, simply the edge of what life can endure. Here's the discovery that flips everything. Ancient humans didn't just pass through the high mountains. They lived there. Not on the death zone summit, but at altitudes that would still leave you gasping and dizzy today. Start in Ethiopia. In the Bale Mountains over 3,000 meters up, archaeologists found a rock shelter with stone tools, burnt animal bones, and even a bead. People were living there 47,000 years ago. 47,000 years. That's the oldest high-altitude home ever found. Older than farming, older than cities, older than almost everything. Now jump to South America. High in the Peruvian Andes at about 4,500 meters, archaeologists found a rock shelter with ancient campfires and rock art used 12,000 years ago. People were living there just 2,000 years after humans first even arrived on the continent. They headed almost straight for the heights. And then, the Tibetan Plateau, the roof of the world, in the very shadow of Everest. At a site called Surrey, 4,400 meters up, in a valley running down from Everest itself, archaeologists found tools left by people quarrying stone more than 5,000 years ago. And DNA hints the story goes back much further, that people began adapting to these heights over 10,000 years ago. So picture the real scene. Not a caveman on the summit, but whole communities, living, working, and raising children in thin, freezing air that would leave most modern people sick within hours. They didn't conquer the summit. They did something harder to believe. They made the impossible heights their ordinary, everyday home. Which forces the real question. Not did they climb it, but how did their bodies survive up there at all? And these weren't quick visits, dashing up and running back down. People returned to these sites again and again. The Ethiopian shelter was used across thousands of years and settled a second time by a later group who used it as a hearth. They ate giant mole rats that burrowed in the highlands and built fires from what little they could find. These were not desperate people trapped up high. They were skilled highlanders who knew how to work the mountains. To survive up high, the human body has to solve a brutal problem: getting enough oxygen from air that barely has any. When a lowlander goes up too fast, the body panics. This is altitude sickness, and it can turn deadly. The body's first desperate fix is to make more red blood cells, the little carriers that ferry oxygen through you. More carriers, more oxygen delivered. It sounds like the perfect solution, but it comes with a dangerous cost. Pack too many red blood cells in, and the blood itself gets thick, sludgy, hard to pump, straining the heart. So simply making more red blood cells is a trap. It helps at first, then slowly poisons you over a lifetime. This is exactly the problem visitors and newer arrivals face at altitude. Their bodies overcompensate and struggle, but the people who have lived on the Tibetan plateau for thousands of years, they don't do this. Their bodies handle the thin air in a smarter, safer way. They keep their blood thinner, yet still deliver plenty of oxygen, avoiding the deadly trap entirely. They are quite literally built differently. For a long time, this was a mystery. How did their bodies learn such an elegant trick when newcomers can't? The answer, when scientists finally found it, was one of the most astonishing discoveries in human genetics, because the secret didn't come from us. It came from someone else. Someone who vanished from the earth long ago. Every cell in your body is quietly demanding oxygen at every moment to turn food into energy. Starve those cells, and the first to suffer is the most oxygen-hungry organ of all, your brain. That's why altitude makes people confused, clumsy, and slow. The brain is being quietly starved. The body has to solve this without a moment's rest, day and night, for an entire lifetime up high. To explain how Tibetans thrive up high, we have to go back to a different kind of ancient human, because our species long ago was not alone. Other kinds of humans walked the earth alongside us. One of them we call the Denisovans, a mysterious cousin, known mostly from a few bones in a cave. They're extinct now, gone. But before they vanished, our ancestors met them and had children with them, and that means a piece of the Denisovans never actually died. It lives on, hidden inside modern people. One of those inherited pieces is a gene called EPAS1, and it may be the single reason Tibetans can live where they do. EPAS1 quietly manages how the body responds to low oxygen, and the Denisovan version does it beautifully. It's the reason Tibetan bodies don't fall into the deadly thick blood trap. It tells the body, stay calm, stay efficient, don't overreact to the thin air. Scientists sometimes call it a super athlete gene, and Tibetans inherited it from a species that no longer exists. Sit with how strange and beautiful that is. A species that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago, reached forward through time, and handed the people living beneath Everest the exact biological gift they needed to survive there. The ancient humans living in Everest's shadow weren't just tough, they were carrying a superpower, borrowed from a ghost. So how ancient humans survived the heights isn't only a story of grit, it's a story written into their blood by another species entirely. The Denisovans were only discovered recently from a tiny finger bone in a Siberian cave. We still barely know what they looked like, yet this half-mysterious species left a fingerprint on living people today, a gene that saves lives at altitude. It's a stunning reminder that extinction isn't always the end. Sometimes a vanished species lives on, quietly, inside us. The people thriving beneath Everest today are, in a real sense, part Denisovan, carrying a lost world in their blood. Which leaves one more question. Maybe the most human one of all. Why? Why go up there at all? It seems insane. The heights are cold, thin-aired, and dangerous. Why would anyone choose to live there? For a long time, people assumed the mountains were just obstacles. Barriers to get around, never destinations. But that gets it exactly backwards. To ancient people, the high mountains weren't a barrier. They were a treasure chest. Think about what the heights offered. Up there was special stone, obsidian and quartz, perfect for making the sharpest tools. There was game to hunt, animals that grazed the high slopes, with few other hunters to compete for them. There was fresh water from melting glaciers. And crucially, there was space. Few predators, few rival groups. Down in the crowded lowlands, you fought for everything. Up high, harsh as it was, a clever group could carve out a life with less competition. The mountains asked a lot, but to those who could adapt, they gave back even more. And little by little, generation by generation, the people who lived there changed, their bodies slowly reshaped by the mountain and by the ancient gift hidden in their blood. They didn't conquer the heights by force. They joined them, became part of the mountains, over thousands of years. There may have been safety up high too. Fewer large predators prowled the extreme altitudes. And there were things found only in the mountains, salt, hot springs, and stone found nowhere else. For a resourceful group willing to adapt, the mountains weren't a place to fear. They were an opportunity. So, did ancient humans reach Everest, the summit? No. That frozen point in the death zone stayed untouched until modern climbers, with all their technology, finally reached it. But everything below it? Ancient humans were there, living, hunting, quarrying stone, raising families, in the shadow of the mountain, thousands of years before anyone dreamed of a summit. And here's the thought to leave you with. A modern climber conquers Everest with $60,000 of gear and a tank of bottled oxygen on their back. The ancient people beneath that same mountain did their impossible thing with none of that, using only a body slowly reshaped over thousands of years, carrying a gift from a species that no longer exists. The climber wears their survival on the outside. The ancient Highlander carried it on the inside, written into their blood. We often think we've conquered nature with our technology, and in a way we have. But those ancient humans did something we can barely imagine. They didn't beat the mountain with tools, they let it change who they were, until surviving the impossible heights wasn't a feat anymore. It was simply who they had become. The next time you see Everest, that impossible, deadly, beautiful peak, remember, long before anyone tried to stand on top of it, people were already there in its shadow, calling it home. They never needed the summit. The mountain was already theirs. It took us thousands of years and a borrowed gene to belong to those heights. The mountain didn't bend to them, they bent to it, and that in the end is how humans have always survived the impossible.